Hello, friends. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. This is the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. Talk for a minute about a comment that was posted in the GM Philosophy Discord. And this is a comment, sort of a question posted by Stuart. Stuart, great question here. Stuart's been posting a lot of great questions lately. The question of whether or not you should ask your players about the theme and tone of your game and about some of the specifics, or whether you should just run the kind of game you want to run and then just tell the players what kind of game you plan to run. There are a lot of conversations going on in the GM Philosophy Discord right now about this topic. I have talked about this before, but I perhaps haven't been as vocal about this because this is something that I've been more recently kind of focused on as we try to figure out how much authority you should claim as a game master about the kind of game you want to run versus how much feedback you should solicit from your players. Okay. So for example, the tone of your game, the theme of your game, whether it's going to be more serious, whether there's going to be more goofiness, whether they want more exploring, whether they want more role play, whether they want more combat heavy, or whether you want these things vice versa, right? So when we're setting up our game, there's a lot of decisions to be made. Who should make those decisions? Who should you consult? And I'm going to post the question here just for a little deeper context. Then I'm going to talk about this for a minute. Do you check with your party before the campaign launches to see what they like when you are the GM, or do you run the campaign the way you like? This is exactly the question. Why I'm asking is because I'm trying to find a balance for my upcoming campaign that focuses on what the players value what the players value the highest versus how I envision running my campaign. How much weight do you put, i.e. ratio between what you think the campaign should look like and how you will run it versus what your players like? Stuart, this is a super good question, and what it all comes down to is priority. And as a game master, and I'm going to start saying this more in 2026, this is going to become the new mantra. You have to choose what your highest priority is as a game master, because there are different priorities we can choose when we run games. So, for example, if my highest priority is to run the type of game I want to run, then that takes the number one spot, right? That's going to dictate everything else that follows. That means if I want to run the kind of game I want to run, and that's my highest priority. If I want to run a gritty, grim, dark D&D 5e game, and I want particular themes, I don't want any goofiness in it. I want it to be very Lord of the Rings-esque, kind of dark fantasy with high fantasy elements, and I want it to feel very classical with the classic stereotyping and the classic themes, then I'm going to make that a priority. I'm going to make that super clear when I pitch people this game, and I'm going to make it so clear and I'm going to be so straightforward with it that basically people who aren't into it are literally not going to want to play my game. They're going to hear it and they're going to be like, it sounds like you're a little too much into this territory. I kind of like a little more of this. Good. Then it's like, then that's not the game for you, right? It's in our best interest to take this approach if we want to play a specific type of game, because the problem we can run into is when we try to pitch a game that's going to appeal to everyone, but we actually want to do this, then everyone's going to expect what you pitched. But then if you try to cram them into a corner, that is a kind of a feel bad. And that's not going to produce as good of creative, immersive results. Okay. Now, there's another way to think about this. And a lot of basically kitchen table game masters fall into this category. The priority is actually to play a game with your friends or the people you like. So let's say, for example, that you have a group of friends and you all decide you want to play D&D together and you think, okay, I want to run a game for my friends. Then you have a different priority. Your priority is to run a game that your whole group will enjoy, because the goal is to play with these people, not to play the certain kind of game you want. Now, there is overlap. There's going to be compromise. There are going to be spectrums of all these things, right? You might compromise a bit on theme. Maybe you all agree a bit on tone. Maybe one of your players literally wants to run kind of a troll character, but they want to do it well. Okay. Maybe you would rather they don't, but maybe you agree to it, because the truth is you want to run a game for your friends versus, or as a higher priority than, running a game with the themes that you want or the tone you want. And when you can manage to play a game, make this game kind of the tones and themes you want, we consider that like a win, but we also have to understand it's not always going to be that way, right? So the vast majority of my game master experiences have been exactly that. The priority has been running games that I think my friends would enjoy. Now, with that being said, I will say that I was pretty fortunate in that a lot of my friends were pretty similar to me in the kind of games they wanted to run, but there were definitely differences. I've had players who kind of played like borderline, not troll characters, but they played characters who were goofy and kind of funny, but then they would dip into serious moments. Me personally, I like to run gritty, grimdark fantasy. Even high fantasy can be a bit too whimsical for my taste. I like it to be brutal, dark, violent, terrible, existential when I run games. So, I was always kind of like playing with those elements, but then there were other things going on. There was like sort of whimsical goofiness going on with one character. I had one character who was really into like basically power gaming, and they would create these like very sort of like, I would say, complex, forceful characters that didn't quite fit with the trope. They would always be a little bit zany, right? And so to me, I always felt a little bit wacky when I compared it to like my ideals, but the games we played were so fun, super cool. And I will say that in that experience, I learned the value of letting players play the characters they want. So, it's just most of my experiences have been that way. I had a lot of great gameplay with that, but I will admit, as I come into a new chapter in running games in my life, what I'm more interested in is telling specific types of stories with players who also want to tell specific types of stories. So for example, and if you want to play in one of my games, I've got games open on Start Playing Games right now. You can check out my profile link to start playing games. I'm running the Darkest Dawn campaign right now. I've got like 3 days of the week, different game openings for that. In fact, my Friday morning game, Friday mornings, 1 a.m. CST, that game just got a new player. We're about to start that game. So if you want to jump right into a game, that would be the one to do it. I also have my Paragon superhero game getting ready to start. So if you're interested in that, then that's kind of a different thing. But there is a specific type of story I want to tell, and I'm trying to make it super plain, super clear in all my descriptions and in the game description and stuff, what I'm looking for. And the reason for this is because I want to find the players who want to tell the kind of story I want to tell. For me, I'm no longer as interested in being like, hey, I'm friends with you and you and you and you. Let's all get together and play D&D. I'm a lot less interested in that kind of gameplay than I am running the kind of game I want to play with the kind of players that also want to tell that story. And here's why: because I want to change those priorities. I'm getting way more passionate about the storytelling aspect. And, that to me is taking a higher function than even the community aspect, because, the truth is, probably for the majority of my gaming career, my time running games with friends, running times at my own kitchen table, and I even used to say this, D&D for me wasn't so much about the game of D&D as it was about something for me to do with my friends that built community in my life, right? So that is a whole different priority. Now, there's nothing wrong with either one. In fact, I think the vast majority of GMs are probably going to fit into that category where they're going to want to prioritize what their players care about more than the exact type of game they want to run. Now, you also have to enjoy it. You can't just run a game you're not going to like, because that's going to be no fun for anybody. So let me go back over Stuart's question and just get real specific now that I've kind of explained some context. Do you check with your party before the campaign launches to see what they like when you are the GM, or do you run the campaign the way you like? Well, that's answered by your priorities. If you already know who you want to play with and you want to play with them and that's the goal, then you should ask them. You should run it by them. You should all sit down and talk about what's important to you, and you should try to include elements that are going to be fitting for all of those categories. And that should be probably more important than just trying to play the game you want to play, but vice versa, depending on what your priorities are. And then Stuart goes on to say, why I'm asking is because I'm trying to find a balance for my upcoming campaign that focuses on what the players value the highest versus how I envision running my campaign. So that balance is the kind of balance I would expect to see if you are looking for player feedback and you want to run a game they want to run, but then you're also trying to make it fun for you. That is a good balance. I think that you're on the right track trying to find that balance. How much weight do you put, i.e. ratio between what you think the campaign should look like and how you will run it versus what your players like? So again, here's where you find that. You want to try to run the game that your players are going to like the most. You try to include all of the factors that are going to be important to them, but you also need to make it fun for you. It needs to at least match with your preferences to some point so that you're excited about the game. I personally find that probably the best way to conceptualize this is to think of it like this. Actually run the kind of game you want to run, and then completely let your players run the kind of characters they want to run. Don't try to like keep your theme capped at you, right? So the NPCs you run, the situations you run, these kinds of things, so theme and tone is like the boundaries of that end with you, and you can invite players into that by inviting them on adventure arcs and such, but you let them run what they want to run, and you let them integrate with your world in whatever way feels natural, and then you weave it all together through the role play as you go, and you just do this case by case. One of your players is playing a troll player who's kind of like more goofy than serious. Okay, everything else in your world might be serious, and then there's this one goofy player. You treat them with the same respect, you give them the same agency, right? You know, see what I'm saying? And you empower them to play that character. You may not necessarily like that, okay, but maybe they actually have fun doing it, and that's a great way to do it. You're having fun because you are running the kind of game you want to play. They're having fun because you're letting them be who they want to be in that game, and this is a win for everyone. Where you start to run into challenges and problems is when you say to your players, I want to run a game you guys would enjoy, but then you do try to encroach on their creativity. So maybe like they think of a character concept, you think to yourself, that doesn't really fit the tone of style that I want to run at all. So then you raise issue with that. It's like, I don't want you to play that character. See, this is where you start to go down a problematic road. And the opposite is true. If your priority is to run a certain type of game with a certain type of theme, then you should screen for this. You should do it. And the recourse is if the other player and you can't reach a point of compatibility, it's probably true that you're not going to be compatible and you actually shouldn't game with them. And you're fine having people walk from your game if they're not a good fit. But obviously, if you're trying to prioritize friendship and community, that's not the goal. The goal is to make everyone feel included and to have a good time with everyone. See, so these are different priorities. So there are my thoughts on that. This is so important. Every game master should understand what their highest priority is before launching into the game. This is going to empower them to create the most successful game possible. So Stuart, great question. For everyone else in the chat who's watching this, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have questions. I've been really enjoying getting back into answering questions. So if you have a request, drop it in the Discord. You can join our Discord, links in the description. We're over 500 game masters strong. Empowering game masters run better games is what we're doing in the Discord every single day. Got a lot of cool stuff going on in there. Or drop a comment here in the comment section. If I am inspired by it, I might make a video featuring your request. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm GM Philosopher. Peace out. I'll see you on the next one.